Okay, good afternoon. I am Garnet Cooke. I am the pesticide coordinator for Oregon OSHA. Can everybody hear me okay in the back? All right. So what I am going to be chatting with you about is our pesticide emphasis program, which does include cannabis and hemp. And these are the areas of our focus in the pesticide emphasis program. We look at hazard communication, the worker protection standard, personal protective equipment, the emergency eye wash, respiratory protection, and pesticide storage. And you'll see by the umbrella all the different items that are considered a pesticide. The word pesticide is like an umbrella. And so it's not just insecticides, it includes herbicides, fungicides, disinfectants, fumigants, rodenticides, and miticides. So our first stop is hazard communication and the worker protection standard. They are complementary of each other, but the hazard communication program applies to all chemicals all the time. The worker protection standard only applies in certain circumstances. The Environmental Protection Agency is the one in charge of the worker protection standard as far as promulgating that rule. And it helps to know the lingo. For example, they call the grower is the ag employer. Workers are employees, but they are not those that handle the chemicals. They are the trimmers, people that are working with the plants themselves, but are not exposed to the concentrated product. Then you have handlers. A handler is a person that is working with the chemicals, a mixer, loader, applier, or someone who is cleaning equipment that has been used to apply pesticides. Then you have the commercial employer, and that's the one that you hire to come in and perform an application at your site. The employees of the commercial employer that are doing that work are called commercial handlers. To make sure that the worker protection standard, this is your key component to know whether or not it applies. If you're using a product that has an ag use box on the label, WPS applies. So here's an example where that would be found on a xylitol label. It's down there in the corner. So if you're doing one of these specific tasks and there's that ag use box, you are in the bucket for the worker protection standard. Now, to start off, WPS, that's its acronym, applies pre-harvest. So anything applied to the crop before it's harvested is a WPS use. So you have dipping cuttings and rooting hormones, applying pesticides onto plants in production, into the water as chemigation, or cleaning inside the greenhouse. A non-WPS task is one that occurs post-harvest or landscape use. If you have someone applying an herbicide around your facility and it's not in the growing area, that's landscape use. And non-production uses of pesticides or cleaning outside of the greenhouse would be a non-WPS use. And before I forget, there are some handouts up at the front. So for WPS training, it requires training at day 1 before any exposure occurs. The trainer must be qualified. They either must be a licensed pesticide applicator or they must have taken a class through the Pesticide Education Resources Collaborative. And I'll provide that website at the end. So there's an online class you can take and then be certified to conduct your employee training. The training materials must be EPA approved. There's an EPA approval number on the videos themselves. The training is annual every year. They must have the same training, or you can show a different video, but it has to be EPA approved. Training records must be maintained, and the training is specific to workers and handlers. They both get the basic worker training, handlers get an additional training. Hazard communication, now this picture up here is an example of what not to do. It is one, the very bad food container. You can see off to the side there's nutritional content. So that's part of secondary labeling. And as I said, that is incorrect. You never put chemicals in a food container. So the hazard communication is a written program. It includes a list of all the chemicals that you have. So that includes pesticides and any other chemicals, disinfectants, pH up and down, all chemicals. That training for hazard communication has to be effective. So it's a performance-based standard, which means if we're out on an inspection and we ask an employee, what can this do if you get it splashed into your eyes? They're going to need to know. It'll cause irreversible eye damage. What's it going to do to your skin? It's going to cause burns on my skin, that type of thing. They have to know the answers. And then secondary container labeling, if you're not going to use that product up that you've put in a secondary container up in that work shift, so it's going to be out of your control, you need to label it with the name of the product and the signal word. If you have chemicals running through pipes, those have to be labeled as well. If you have outside contractors coming in to do work on your site, you need to inform them of the chemical hazards that their employees might be exposed to so they can be protected as well. Hazard communication training is very important. There was recently a fatality at a Buffalo Wild Wings where they mixed a chlorine-based cleaner with an acid-based cleaner, generated toxic gas. The worker was the one that put it on the floor, and the manager is the one that died because he was trying to squeegee it off. They did not have hazard communication training. They were unfamiliar with the reactions of the chemicals. Eye protection is based upon the signal word, and it's also for pesticides. So for example, if you're using a caution label product, you would need to have the one up there that says caution that's got the brow protection and side protection of the eyes. Danger level chemicals, there's two varieties of the goggles up there. One looks kind of the old chemistry lab type, and the other is a more stylish, cooler looking one that you get more compliance with people wearing them if they don't look dorky when they are using it. Even though you'll see in a moment, irreversible eye damage is not something you want to have at any rate. And then danger poison, you shouldn't be using any product that has a danger poison level. And then warning is a combination safety glasses with the face shield. So what might you use that requires both an eye wash and chemical splash goggles? Here's one for Oxidate 2.0. When you see the danger on the signal word, this means it's corrosive to the eye. You're going to need an eye wash because that's what irreversible eye damage looks like. The personal protective equipment required is in the top arrow right above the eye, the nasty eye, and it will tell you all the personal protective equipment that you must wear while using that product. Here's another disinfectant, Sanidate 5.0. Again, danger level signal word, which means you're going to have an emergency eye wash, and you can see the bottom arrow shows where the ag use box is located. Now, not to be left out, I've put in pH up and pH down. These are not pesticides, but they both need an eye wash. One because it's acidic and the other because it's a caustic. They both will cause irreversible eye damage. These are the type of emergency eye washes you can have. You can have the plumbed unit. You can have the portable units, depending on your need. The one on the bottom with the line with the circle with the line through it, that is not acceptable. You cannot get a 15-minute hands-free flush, because when you get something corrosive in your eye, you're going to have to pry your eyes open, because the natural inclination is to clamp them down as tight as they can be because it hurts so bad, and so you've got to pry them open and flush them. Respiratory protection, the picture indicates inappropriate respiratory protection. And a respirator program is required for two reasons. One, if the pesticide label carries the requirement to wear respiratory protection, it's required, a respirator program is required. If the respirator is required to be worn by the employer, that the employer takes that extra step, then a respirator program is required. So what's all in a respirator program? It is written, and we have, anytime I mention a written program, we have these available on our website to download. So with the respirator program comes a medical evaluation. An employee has to fill out a questionnaire, and that's reviewed by a healthcare provider to look for any red flags. And that's a one-time deal unless they have a medical condition come up in the meantime. Fit testing is required annually. For each type of respirator that's used, there's an annual training requirement. There are inspections of the respirator to make sure they're being stored correctly, and there's care, cleaning, storage, and a yearly evaluation of the program. Now, you don't have to have a danger poison to see a respirator requirement on the label. This is a caution label product, and a lot of the biological products will require the use of a respirator. And when it's required on the label, the whole plan kicks in. And so the red arrow is indicating where that is on that label. Here's one for dipel-DF. Again, requires a respirator. And this one is saying any R or any N, R, or P. And so it's talking about a particulate respirator, and this is what they look like. So all of these are for particulates. Now, the helmet version on the bottom, the benefit to that, and they also make them with a soft shell, is that it does not require it to be a fit testing requirement. Medical evaluation is required for all of those. The other ones are all different types of particulate respirators. They are, if you'll notice, all of them have a rubber seal. And so that makes fit testing that you can pass a successful fit test. Now, you shouldn't see the requirement to wear an organic vapor respirator, but that's having an additional cartridge on there that has carbon in it that filters out organic vapors. There is a practice that's not, that some may be engaged in, of burning sulfur. Be aware that sulfur causes dermatitis, as well as it has a permissible exposure limit of 5 parts per million. So air monitoring is required if you are burning sulfur. And that's a very low amount. And so that cartridge that you see is called an acid gas cartridge, and that is the appropriate cartridge to use when working with sulfur dioxide. Hand protection, there's a wide variety of gloves out there. So on this particular label, which is easier to see up there than on the screen here, but there is a specific thickness required. If the label is specific to a type of glove, that is the type of glove that must be used. Thickness matters. You cannot use exam gloves from the doctor's office when working with pesticides. This, down at our booth down in the exhibit hall, there are brochures that have this chart in there. And so if it says follow category A, B, C, D, E, or whatever, you can go along the line, and wherever it says offers a high degree of protection, you can use those type of gloves. The only one that doesn't require a thickness is barrier laminate, which looks like foil, and then the polyethylene. They don't have thickness requirements. But the others all have to be at least 14 mil. Decontamination is vitally important. It has to be soap, water, and paper towels. The handlers, the people working with the pesticides, have to have a change of coveralls in case they get a splash. And so it's important to decontaminate after mixing loading, before and after making adjustments on the equipment, before eating, smoking, or bathroom breaks. Pesticide storage, you don't want it to look like any of these pictures. That is bad. Now, Mike's going to talk about their experiences over at the Oregon Department of Agriculture and the MCAP program, and they recommend, when you're in the program, to contact an Oregon OSHA consultant to come out and help you with all these requirements. These are the phone numbers for the consultants. Call them. Because last year we only had 2 participate. And so we have, of our enforcement inspections, 100% had violations. So my word to you is you can either pay for a fine and fix it, or just fix it. So just fixing it is much better. This is the website for if you're not a licensed applicator and you need to do training for your employees. This is the website that's got oodles of information on pesticides and the worker protection standard. We also have resources galore at the Oregon OSHA website, and we also do an annual report of our findings, and so you can look at that and see where we're looking at where we're finding our violations. And that's my contact information, and as I said, I have some handouts up at the front, but I know you'll really want to hear what Mike has to say. Any questions? Okay.
All right, I'm going to try not to talk quite as fast as Garnet, but it's got to be quick anyway. If you have a question en route anywhere along this, wave and then come up to the stand and ask the question, okay? Because it's better to ask the question and get it out there than not. So let's go through where we've gone in the last 4 years with cannabis. I'm just going to use cannabis so I can keep them both. But this gives you a quick rundown of where we started. I got involved way down here about there, 2016, when the testing rules came into effect for marijuana. This was really interesting because all of a sudden we have legal crop in the state that's illegal federally, and then we're testing for pesticides. There are no pesticides allowed on a crop that doesn't have a tolerance. So it made life difficult. And the reason it makes life difficult is because all pesticide law is based on this triangle. If you look here at the bottom is the Federal Insecticide, Rodenticide, Fungicide Act. And it's all codified and all sorts of numbers. But basically that's what gives us the framework for all pesticides. The federal government does all the testing and approvals to put a crop on a label. Before you can use a pesticide on a food crop or a feed crop, there has to be an agreement for a residue tolerance so that we know at what level or below is that food safe for people or animals to eat. Have we done anything with hemp yet? No, because the feds have just now come around last year and said, hey, let's raise this. So there's nothing, okay? The Department of Agriculture and the state has a cooperative agreement with the EPA to enforce that. And then we have our own state statute. So here I am enforcing federal law and state law that says if you use a pesticide on a crop for which there is no tolerance, residue tolerance allowed, and we find a residue, it's considered an adulterated crop. Guess what happens to an adulterated crop? It goes to the dump. It will not go to market. Not a happy place. And now I've got the state telling me, oh, by the way, this is legal, so let's go ahead and do this. Make it happen. So have you ever stood straddling an electric fence in a rainstorm? You know what happens, right? Well, guess where I am right now. That's the way we've been the last 4 years, trying to figure out how do we negotiate this thing. Hemp exploded last year. Year before last, that was a pear orchard. This year, pear trees are still there. Theoretically, they might grow back. Pears are pretty good about growing back from the stump. But we got rows of hemp in between. 63,000 acres outdoors were registered, and about 10.2 million square feet were registered for indoors. And that was just hemp. We still have marijuana out there, although not near as much as we used to. So when we first got legalized, one of the things that came up was, well, how do we take care of our pests? Legislature said, ODA figured out. We have got to have legal pesticides that they can use. So we came up with criteria. How are we going to do this? So the first criteria was that the active ingredient in that pesticide that we say is okay to use on cannabis cannot have a requirement for a food tolerance. There are some products out there that are safe enough that they are exempt from a tolerance. Azadiractins, neem oils, some of the mostly the essential oil products, okay? But the other thing is the label's got to be written in such a way that we can infer cannabis from the way they wrote that. Plants in a greenhouse, green plants in a backyard, that sort of thing, okay? And believe it or not, we found some. And then the last one was an if. If there was a pyrolysis test done on that particular pesticide, it could not have failed that pyrolysis test. Simple matter is, if they burn it, if it generates something bad, then we can't use it. Most pesticides have never had a pyrolysis test done on them, okay? So, but we had to put that in there. So we were able to come up with a fairly long list. There's more than 300 of those products up there now, mostly the neem oils, the essential oils. There's some bacilluses on there now, that sort of thing. Go to our Department of Agriculture website and look it up. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Could you go back to your level of concern point? I guess I want to make sure I understand that if it doesn't have any testing, it's kind of a out of sight, out of mind issue. It's almost like there'd be a negative incentive here for some of the pesticides in use. And if so, also, did I understand you correctly with pyrolysis? It seems relevant on hemp and cannabis where it's ingested with smoking, that testing with regard to heat would be relevant in terms of the residue levels being consumed. I don't know if that's a really well-stated question, but it seems like...
I think there's several here.
There's two separate questions.
Run that first one by me again about the relevance level.
The level of a concern is not automatically given in a pesticide, obviously, unless it's already been tested. So it seems like for pesticides, I would want to gravitate, if I didn't care about pesticides on my product, I would gravitate perhaps toward a pesticide that doesn't have a level of concern established, because if there isn't a previously established LOC, I don't have to worry about what's on it for that particular metric.
Okay, you're throwing me with level of concern.
Yes. With the LOC.
Oh, okay.
If there
That's
wasn't a
the
prior,
failing.
right, if
Yeah,
there wasn't
okay.
a study already to
So-
establish
so-
that LOC.
Pyrolysis got involved with tobacco.
Okay.
And so only products that wanted to be used on tobacco were run with a pyrolysis test. And then we discovered that they didn't really worry too much about what that really told us, because tobacco's already bad for us.
Okay.
The thing was, we as a state of Oregon can't require a registrant to do a pyrolysis test. So if they hadn't had it done, we're just saying, okay. If they did have it done and it failed, no, we can't even go there, okay? So I get what you're saying, because yes, one of the methods of ingesting hemp or marijuana is obviously smoking, and so we do have an issue.
Is that as big of a gap in regulations as it sounds like?
I'm not going to tell you no. With the products that we have here that are on the
guide
list here,
Yeah.
I'm not so worried about it.
Okay.
Okay, because most everything we've got here are very, very, what the department, EPA says is a minimal risk pesticide, the essential oils, the neem oils, that sort of thing. So I'm not so worried about it. When we start getting into, EPA starts approving some of the more mainstream products, then maybe,
Okay.
okay?
Because it may or may not take into account the type of exposure we're getting.
Yeah, But
Okay.
that's one of the problems that we're going to have as we get products registered, as EPA starts looking at that, all of the different ways which we have to ingest hemp.
Okay, so what you're saying is this list tends to be a little safer because of what the industry's preference is for these kinds of things, which are in the essential oil category, not because of the studies that have, in particular, of these items on the list, as opposed to what the EPA may now start establishing in addition. Okay.
Yeah. We
Okay.
were looking for products that were fairly safe. That's why they don't have a tolerance requirement. And two, that would allow us to give you something.
Got it.
Because if we had to go to a label that says there's hemp on it, up until just recently, you'd have been out of luck. And so then what do you do? Okay?
All right, thank you.
Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that list is on our ODA's pesticides webpage. Go in there and look at it. If you think you have a product that might fit those criteria, call us and let us know, because we find things and we're continually updating this list, okay? I think I pushed the wrong button.
There's a blackout button on the remote, a little black.
That
A
one.
lot of people, yeah.
There we
click that
go.
accidentally. So we'll reset this back, sorry. From current slide.
Okay, perfect. So just recently, EPA came out with a list that said, hey, we've got all these products now, I think there's 11 of them, that are actually labeled for hemp, not marijuana, because they still can't look at that. So these are the ones, and like our original list, most of them are neem or azadirachtin products. There's a couple of bacillus products in there, in that list. And so we will have that adopted onto our list, okay? And just so we can say that we've actually seen hemp on a label, I pulled up, Debugo is one that just got approved by EPA. That has hemp on the label, okay? Understand, it could be 18 months down the road before this label hits the market. That's the requirement that EPA has. If you change your label, you have up to 18 months to get it out there. If Debugo wants to be in the market, they'll have it in here next spring. But I can't promise you that. So if you are looking to buy this product or any of those others, make sure you look at the label of the jug that you're buying to make sure it says hemp on it. Because you can't pull a label off of the internet that says hemp and use that label. You're obligated to use the label that is on the container. And I can tell you that on any given day in the marketplace, any of these products that you see may have 2 or 3 different labels out there. It can drive us crazy, but that's the way it goes, okay? And you know this action list, right? This is the market access test that you have to pass before you go to market. Every 30-pound batch has to be tested for all of these actives. If you are below this action level, then you can go to market. If you're above it, you can't. Since 2016, that's the list of different active ingredients that we have been reported by the Oregon Health Authority and the Oregon Liquor Control Commission that they have found in different marijuana batches. Chlorpyrifos is being reviewed now, both at the federal level and at the state level and many other states, because of neurological damage, neurological development damage to children. So here's a big deal. And did it pass a pyrolysis test? I can't tell you. I don't think it did. I don't think anybody ever considered it. But now we've got a product that we're smoking, we're inhaling, and it's there. It's not such a big deal if you ingest it because our digestive system takes it and expels it. But if you inhale it, it goes directly to the bloodstream. It's kind of a big deal. So, but that's the list. Because of the initial onslaught right after testing became law, we put in a compliance assistance program to, one, help us out with dealing with the numbers, but two, help out a new industry, many of whom have never been involved with pesticides before. So that's where we came up with the Marijuana Compliance Assistance Program, or, because you're not raising marijuana, the hemp, okay? And nobody will allow us to just call it all cannabis. So here we go. But that's, we're doing this to help people out. And part of the reason was, under Oregon Liquor Control Commission rules, if you violate state statute, you're going to lose your license. If you fail for a pesticide product, that's a violation of state statute, that 634 that I enforce, and those guys were apt to lose their license. And so we worked out a deal. Hey, let us work with these guys on the first time. If they go through the MCAP process with us and pass it, don't hold it against them. So they did. They agreed to that. So if you have a first-time failure, we're going to offer you this compliance assistance program. You don't have to take it, but it may pay off. Okay. Now it's going to do too much. So this is what the Compliance Assistance Program looks like. Now you can see that it was only going to be effective from October of 16 to June of 17. I can tell you 4 years later I'm still doing it, okay? Because we haven't come up with a better method to deal with this yet. And we're still getting first-time failures, people jumping in. But if you agree to that, we're going to come down here and this is what you're going to have. You're going to let us come in and do an inspection of the property. We're going to walk through and try to pick out things that you're doing wrong and tell you, hey, this needs to be fixed. We're not going to sample or detain the product, which we would normally do in a formal investigation. We are going to give you a violation for using a product off-label. You're going to waive the rights for a hearing. You're going to do that. You're going to take a pesticide applicator's test that tells us you know the rules when you pass that test. You'll give us a plant inventory and provide us everything you used. Because one of the things that we learned early on is that some of you have applied things legally and you're getting illegal residues in those products. We've got 6 neem oil products still on stop sale because when we tested them, we came up with soup to nuts to you name it. There was chlorpyrifos, bifenthrin, 5 or 6 different active ingredients in that neem oil as a contaminant. What level does that then transfer into your hemp? We don't know. But you could have applied that and failed your market access test totally innocently. So we are looking for those trends, and the reason that those products are currently on stop sale is because we identified them through MCAPs. If we had more time, I could tell you lots of stories, but we don't. So if you do all that, we generate a closing letter, and everybody goes on and is hunky-dory. If you say, hey, I don't want to do all this, then we're going to come over here and we're going to do our normal investigative process, which includes I'm going to walk in onto the farm and I'm going to slap a detainment on everything growing on the farm or in-house. It can't leave the farm. Then I'm going to go through and dig up what's going on, and I am truly investigating you. It's not a lot of fun, okay? So that's why we've really pushed this agreement voluntary process. Does extraction concentrate products in the plant or in the oil? So this is my first absolute proof, yes. So we got this from a grower, and he said, hey, this is my biomass test. And you can see he's got a low hit of chlorpyrifos there. It's 0.08, so it's good to go to market, isn't it? Did it pass the action level test? Yes. If it's below 0.2, you're okay. Did this guy apply chlorpyrifos to his hemp? I doubt it. Okay? But he took this biomass and he extracted it. And as normal, you've got to have your extraction product tested, right? Well, guess what? He now has 0.4 chlorpyrifos. It's now a failure, isn't it? Look what else comes up. Ethoprophis. This is mocap. It's another insecticide. Wasn't there in the first one, but now we've got 0.1. So yes, we are concentrating. We all kind of knew that anyway, but we are definitely concentrating when we extract. What's his option with this now? Since he had the raw biomass tested and it passed prior to extraction, when he fails here, he can work with our hemp program to then remediate this oil, which means you go back out and what is it? It's not extraction at that point, but you're going to pull it out to isolate or the higher refinements. And then you can retest. And if it's good, then you can go to market. If it's not, then it goes to the dump. Okay? But we are learning lots of questions. This is an actual case this year. So if you happen to know the person who it is, don't say anything because I'm not trying to make them feel bad by doing this. But we had a hemp crop. I think this is hemp. This might be marijuana. And surrounded by grass fields. I've got 8 different of these cases going right now, and they're almost all identical. But he harvested some, had it tested, failed for chlorpyrifos, called us and said, I think I was drifted upon. So we've come out. The first thing we did was we sampled in the cannabis that was there, and then we took soil samples through here. And you can see what our results come up with. We found chlorpyrifos in every sample, pretty low levels. We did not find it in the soil. We went a little further, which we will normally do. We're always going to go try to find out where it came from. So here's the grow, and we sampled in every grass field all the way around it. Guess what? We found low levels all the way around it. In our check with the growers, no one had applied chlorpyrifos in the last growing season. Where did it come from? If you look at these numbers, they're actually lower than the numbers here, or very much the same if you would want to go that far. Here's the highest one, I think. So what's that tell us? We don't know. We don't know where this stuff's coming from. Did the hemp plant or the cannabis plant pull that out of the soil? Did it pull it out of the air as some of it blew by? But we don't have a source. So we don't know what's going on. We did work with this grower, and we took samples out of his sprayers. He had 3 different sets of sprayers on the property. So we went in and pulled samples out of that. Guess what? There's no chlorpyrifos into them. We are pretty convinced this grower didn't apply chlorpyrifos. No, by the way, he didn't apply neem oil either. So we don't think he got it through a contamination by a product that he applied. But what are we going to do with this? I don't know. This is his harvested dried material. It's in big bags in a barn, but you can see all these numbers. If these were market tests, this one is the only one that could go to market at this point. We don't have an answer for you, but we are actively working on trying to figure out where can we go here. Based on the rules that I have to live by, even this batch can't go to market because it's considered adulterated. So we are working on that, trying to find a way around that whole process as well. And we're almost out of time. This was our first adulterated product that we ever found. During the first initial phase of testing, several marijuana growers got together with one of the labs and they tested to see what they were going to come up with, because everybody was deathly afraid of this market action test when we first started. And guess what? They all failed. They all failed for abamectin. And they came back to the lab owner and said, it's got to be you, because we didn't use this stuff. And so he went back through his process, says, wasn't me. So he did a little study, went through and talked to each of the growers, got what they used on their crop. And Guardian was the only common factor. So he took some Guardian and tested it. And guess what he found? Abamectin at not just small numbers, but pretty good numbers. You can see what the list is, what's supposed to be in there. Citrus, cinnamon oil, lemongrass oil, citric acid, the common stuff. But it's got abamectin in it. I happened to call the owner, and got one of the owners back in Midwest, and said, hey, what's going on? We're putting a stop sale on this because it's contaminated. And he goes, well, what's the problem? We're only out an ounce of abamectin per gallon of this stuff. And it's like, I said, did you really just tell me that? And sure enough, that's what he told us. I think he's in jail now. Note $432 for 16 ounces. It's got to be good, right? All of the guys, all the retailers that we bought this from said, hey, it's the only one that works. It's flying off the shelves. Now we know why. And then with the neem oils, we went out and looked and kept finding and continue to find contaminants in that. So go to our website and look in the advisory section, and it will list all of the neem oils specifically by the name and the manufacturer that are still on stop sale. Many of those manufacturers have worked with us. They've identified the lots that were bad, pulled them out of the market, and then tested and re-registered the current products. So if you find it on the shelf, it's likely going to be okay, but be careful with it. But oh, guess what? If we're putting bad pesticides in pesticides, can't we do that to fertilizers as well? So we're finding growth regulators and all sorts of stuff in there. It's now 2:15, so we got to go. So be careful. If you have a question, call us. We'll be happy to help. I would much rather you be successful growing this than me have to come out and say, your crop's not going to market. Okay? It's no fun to do that. That's my contact information. Please don't hesitate to call. And if you don't get it written down, it's on the website as well. And any of us in the pesticide program are more than happy to spend the time talking to you. Come on in. We're getting ready to close up so that you guys can all be successful. Any questions? All righty. Oh, come on up to the front. You got to come up and speak into the mic.
I was going to see if what you're finding in the soil and stuff could have came from planes or any type of spray or anything like that.
What we're finding, is it coming from plants or from spray?
Mm-hmm.
there are all sorts of that going on. Okay, first off, some plants do make a pesticidal active. It's not usually what one we're going to be looking for. Okay, residues in the soil from previous applications, absolutely. And in these chlorpyrifos cases that we're looking at, we're looking at what was used in this particular field in the last 5-6 years, because hemp is a bioaccumulator. We know that. Is it able to pull stuff out of the soil that we can't find in a soil test? We don't know. There's no data. But we're not going to go so far as to say it's not happening.
Yeah.